Well, before I go any further and even begin tonight, I want to acknowledge Canovi and Associates, and Matt is being pretty humble here. They put a lot of time into organizing this. They put a lot of effort into it, and they're the ones casting the vision to make these kind of things happen so that you people can come and have a venue to be informed on all these various issues, not just economic preparedness, but how to harden your home against crime and the other things that he's doing as well. So Matt and Angie Canovi pour a lot of heart into it as well. I've known Matt for a little over a year, and not only do they offer really good products and services for what they do, but they've got a heart behind it that really, truly cares about you guys. And I would really highly recommend that anything that you can do to be a part of what they're doing, anything that they are doing and offering that you need to learn from, they are a fantastic source. So I want to give them a hand for everything that they've done as well. Well, I have to say, tonight's going to be a little different. I've given this talk, golly, I don't know how many dozens of times, and from time lengths ranging anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours. But I got a little bit of a mood going on tonight, okay? It's kind of a cut to the chase kind of a mood because there's a lot of things going on out there. So what I'm going to probably do is lay down some history. I don't ever make an assumption that everybody understands the background and the history that got us to the point where we are today, where we need to have a meeting like we're having tonight, okay? So I never make that assumption. So we're going to go through a period of time, and if you know all this stuff, or if you know any of it, then bear with me. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but there's a little bit of a foundation that we need to lay first. And you also need to kind of know my perspective and where I'm coming from. I'm a father of 5. I'm a pastor. I speak. I also work in the precious metals industry. I work with an organization called the Sound Money Center that is active right now in trying to restore sound money to the various states around this country so we can protect ourselves from the dollar devaluation that you guys are all here wanting to figure out, hey, what's the end game look like? And we'll talk about that end game a little bit later. So that gives you a little bit of foundation of who I am. So I'm going to ask a few questions so I can get a little bit of an understanding who I have in the audience today. How many of you are active politically? Would consider yourself to be active politically? I mean, it's in part of your public discourse. You're not afraid to talk about politics. How about, are you associated kind of with the Tea Party maybe? How many Tea Partiers do we have out there? Libertarians, conservatives, who would consider yourself to be liberal? Never yet. I'm waiting for that firsthand. I'm waiting for that. Although, I will say what we're talking about tonight, this issue of money and the devaluation of it affects everybody, and it's starting to cross all ideological boundaries. People are beginning to understand that there's something going on out there that I need to understand. Some of them are a little slower on the uptake, but hey, that's where we're at. Okay, how many are active in a local church? Okay, good. Oh, yeah, that's a good thing. Good thing. All right. Well, then you will. That'll give me an idea of kind of how to present the initial part of this presentation and give you a little bit of an understanding of where I'm coming from. Because yes, I take everything back to obviously Scripture and say, what does it have to say about what we're going to talk about tonight? About 10 years ago, well, actually about 12 years ago, I made a ton of money in the stock market. I was a really, really good investor. I was a smart guy. And about 3 years later, I was a really dumb guy. And it was through that experience where I went, something's wrong with this whole system. Wealth should not be able to be created and destroyed that easily by someone who really doesn't know that much about it. And that was me. So it sent me on kind of a journey to go, what's going on with this system? What is this? A monetary system, our investment system, all those kind of things. What allowed me to go on that roller coaster ride? And through that process, it took me to where I wrote a book titled Fool's Gold, How the Traditions of Men Have Replaced God's Honest Money. And basically what I found out was this. We've got a problem with our monetary system. We're going to start with some quotes from our founding fathers because obviously they're pretty smart guys, aren't they? Pretty smart guys. And John Adams, he's one of my favorite smart guys from those days. And he says this, all the perplexities and confusion, distress in America arise not from want or honor or virtue, but from the downright ignorance of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. And the truth of the matter is, as a nation, we've been woefully ignorant for a very long time about issues related to money. Because we've been just very happy to ride along on this thing that looked like prosperity, right? we're all doing okay. The boom time of the 90s, everything was really good and rolling. And why should we care about what money is? Why should we care? We became ignorant. Okay, we just have to admit that. That's part of one part of having to turn things around. You got to say, yeah, okay, I missed it. And now we drive the stake in the ground and say we're not going to do that anymore. John Kenneth Galbraith was a Keynesian economist from Canada. In the United States, he wrote a lot. There were like 40 books, a prolific writer. And he had some interesting things to say about money and our monetary system. He said, the study of money above all other fields is one in which complexity is used to disguise truth or to evade truth, not to reveal it. So, in economics, it is a truth, and this is a truth, that, when you hear these people out there in these think tanks today, around the country talking about, economics and the Federal Reserve and their monetary policies and the global economic system and all those kind of things. They cast this aura around it that makes it seem like you and I can't understand it. And yet, that's a bunch of baloney. Because he also made another statement, says the process by which banks create money is so simple that the mind is repelled. Really, when it comes down to it, monetary policy, the creation of money, the issuing of money into the economy, at the rate that is done, has a huge effect on the economy itself. So the mechanism that money is created is very important. It's very important. It's very easy, the way they do it these days, which is part of the problem. All right? So these are some of the things we look at from folks in history. Well, let's look at the news today. We're going to bring you up to speed here on these news headlines. You may have seen some of these, but these are the kind of headlines that people are reading today, right? Bernanke's transitory inflation argument ignores China and the global economy. The U.S. needs to generate 254,000 jobs a month for 65 months. To get to a pre-depression employment by the end of Obama's second term. So on and on and on. We've got these things. The S&P looks like they're going to downgrade U.S. debt. All these things are hanging out there in the news. And for the most part, the mainstream media wants to ignore the reality of what this means. These headlines signify a trend. Okay? A trend is a long-term, lots of momentum, multi-year, multi-decade force in the economy that has inertia behind it that is tremendous. You do not just turn an economy on the dime. It doesn't matter whether it's the national economy or the global economy, certainly. You just don't throw out a policy one day and say, oh, this is going to fix it. That's what makes these budget talks that are going on in Washington right now just a charade. No matter what they come up with, the pig is in the python, so to speak. It's moving through. And there's not a whole lot that they can do about it. Now, in reality, could they do some very, very drastic things and maybe make some significant changes? In 2008, 2009, when the financial crisis broke, they could have. And we would have gone through some really, really difficult times in 2010 and even right up to now. But we'd be working our way out of it. We'd be moving through all the transition that we need to and coming out on the other side of it right now. Instead, what we have ahead of us is going to probably be deeper and longer because they've kicked the can down the road. And that's their favorite thing to do. That's what politicians do. That's what they'll do in Washington here. They'll bluster and they'll huff and they'll puff and all these kind of things. And whatever comes out of all this blustering will have maybe some impact, but it's not going to stop the trend that was put in place decades ago, well, actually almost 100 years ago, when we started to move away from a particular type of money that would have kept a lot of this stuff from happening. So let's go back even to the beginning. Okay, I told you this was going to be from a biblical perspective. If we look at what honest money is from the perspective of the Bible, it says, you will not have in your bag differing weights, a heavy and a light. You shall not have in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall have a perfect weight, a just weight, and measure that your days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. For all who do such things, that is, use the dishonest weight, all who behave unrighteously are an abomination to the Lord your God. So I have to ask you a question. I don't have it with me now. But take out a piece of paper money and hold it up. Usually do that, okay? Pretend I've got a $20 bill. What is it? Paper. What else is it? Useless. What else is it? It's a promise. It's an abomination. For those of us who look at the Bible for our guidance, it's an abomination to God because it's a dishonest weight and measure. So the bottom line is, when we look at what our money is, it is a dishonest weight and measure. And that brings on a whole set of issues that surround this topic of money that most people don't think about. They look at economics. They look at how it impacts, in particular, business and global financial systems, but they really don't look at it from its moral component. And we're going to look at that a little bit tonight as well, because it cannot be ignored. So if we look at what this looks like, dishonest weights and measures, 2011 BC. Okay, this is what we're talking about when they're transacting in their honest or dishonest weights and measures, or honest weights and measures of the day. Customer comes along, buys 50 pounds of wheat, plops it on the scale, throws on weight on the other side, and says it's 50 pounds. They do the transaction, they pay for it, and leave. But guess what? This was actually just 45 pounds. Now, people don't carry around 50 pounds with them, so they're trusting that this merchant had an honest weight and measure. Well, he didn't. So what happens? He was credited 5 pounds of wheat dishonestly. That's an abomination to God. That's called a dishonest weight and measure. That's called what? Cheating, stealing. It was wrong then. Well, let me look here. Oh, the same thing applies as if the buyer came along and paid him with a 90% denarius coin. It's only 90% silver. He cheated him. He devalued that coin. He maybe clipped a little off, which was some of the things that they did in those days to try and cheat their people out of their just and due compensation. Okay? So this is the foundation that we look at today. Now, our founding fathers knew this. They knew of all this history. They knew of all the history that surrounded the previous monetary systems that were set up on paper money and fiat money and how they failed. And they had some fairly pointed things to say about this whole thing. Paper money has had the effect in your state that it will ever have to ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open the door to every species of fraud and injustice. And that's George Washington in a letter to a Rhode Island senator when they had paper money in their state. Daniel Webster said, of all the contrivances for cheating the laboring classes of mankind, none has been more effective. None has been more effective. Now you think about this statement. For cheating the laboring classes, because that's you and me, right? The elites that sit and print this stuff, they get all they want. But for you and me, it cheats us. Which deludes them with paper money. And when we get these monetary systems in place, people just don't understand. They don't see it. They see a fake prosperity. They see an illusion. And it deludes them into thinking that, hey, everything's okay, until one day it's not. We look at the protections then that they wrote into the Constitution, because again, they knew this history. They said, listen, we're going to offer you some protection so that this kind of paper money system isn't going to come and cheat you out of your just compensation. Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution says no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payments of debt. Well, guess what? For the first time in 80 years, a state actually stood up and said, we're going to do that. Utah, just a couple of months ago, passed a sound money bill that made gold and silver coin, again, legal tender of payment of debts in that state. And that's the first state to have done that, I believe, in at least 80 years. There's something about Colorado going on out there. They've had one on the books for a long time, but they're the first one that stood up and actually declared, we want this protection in the Constitution that's been given us. Well, we'll talk a little later about all the stirrings that has caused, because it's really stirred the pot. You're not seeing a lot of it now, but there's a lot of scrutiny going on, both positive and negative, from some of the higher powers that be on what they're doing out in Utah. Well, if we look at the history again of money in the United States and the price level, this is from, let's look at the source, Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. So this isn't Doug Tjaden's graph. This isn't a graph I pulled data off the internet. This is from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. If we look at the price level of the United States, when we take a basket of goods that hasn't changed over time, because who knows, how many of you know today that they changed the way that the CPI is calculated? Yeah, they do things like substitution. Well, let's see. Beef's getting real expensive, so we're going to substitute hamburger for steak in the CPI. And that helps them recalculate the CPI. It doesn't give an accurate representation at all of the real cost of goods and services that are out there, but that's the way they monkey with things to keep things like payments for Social Security down. I digress.